Good morning. I'm Gloria with Action Speaks, and I'm here to continue my reading of research, studies, and history that will authenticate or that authenticates my production of my new book, Every Child Born Gifted. Thank you very much for tuning in with us today, and we shall continue to read from the topic, Racial Identity and Context for the Gifted African American Student, when who I am impacts how I am represented, addressing minority student issues in different contexts. The author is Julie A. Moore. Geographical code is 1 USA. The date of publication, January 1st, 2002. Words, 5,129. Publication, Roper Review. ISSN number 02783193. Thank you again for listening, and we shall continue on the subject of broader conceptions of racial identity. Boykin's triple quadri theory, Boykin 1986, Boykin and Ellison 1995, and the multi-dimensional model of racial identity, MMRI, Sellers, Smith, Shelton, Rowley, and Chauvis, 1998. Both offered explanations for how such a bicultural identity might work. According to the triple quadri theory, Boykin 1986, Boykin and Ellison 1995, African Americans are simultaneously part of three cultural rims: the mainstream white middle class, the Afro culture, and the minority rims. The mainstream rim reflects white middle class values, including individualism, reflects white middle class values, including individualism, reflects individualism and competition. The African American culture is an outgrowth of the unique cultural experiences of people of African descent in America. The minority rims reflects the oppression that African Americans have experienced in America. The school setting, and especially a gifted classroom, typically represents a mainstream rim, according to Boykin and Ellison 1995, Irvin and Irvin 1995. Many African American families emphasize communalism, value expressiveness, Boykin 1986. This may present a conflict for African American students because most classrooms can be characterized by high competition and individualism. The problem may be compounded. A plane flying over, excuse me. The problem may be compounded by the fact that African American students are underrepresented in gifted classrooms and may feel more isolated socially and culturally. there's a plane. I'm sure you hear it. The problem may be compounded by the fact that African American students are underrepresented in gifted classrooms and may feel more isolated socially and culturally. Ford, 1994. While many accounts suggest African American students must either identify with their racial group or with academic achievement, Boykin and Ellison, 1995, have suggested that the picture is more complex. By varying the degree of participation, amount of time, type of contact, and level of competency within a domain, and orientation, identification with the social realm, including positive or negative attitudes toward school and social networks, students may be able to maximize their level of comfort in each arena. For instance, students may have a high degree of participation in gifted classes, but have a neutral orientation towards them. They may do well in gifted classes, but not view being gifted as a central component of their self-concept. Such students may also demonstrate a high degree of participation with and positive orientation toward African American peers. A less adaptive profile of an African American gifted student might be whose focus is on negative cues from the minority rim, leading to low participation in the gifted classroom. This student may feel isolated within the classroom because of perceptions of discrimination, especially by teachers, leading to low levels of achievement. Whereas the triple quadrille theory, Boykin, 1986, Boykin and Ellison, 1995, suggests that levels of participation and orientation vary across social contexts. The MMRI posits that the relative importance of being African American varies across settings. Sellers, et.al., 1998. The racial salience component of the MMRI is an indicator of the extent to which race is important at a particular point in time. Salience reflects the fact that cues from the social context may make a particular identity more important. For instance, a man's identity as parent may be less salient while he is at work than when he is at home. Race tends to be more salient in situations where the individual's group is in the minority. Sellers, et.al., 1998. A bicultural racial identity may be conceived of as one in which racial salience varies widely across social situations. African American students who are able to bridge the mainstream classroom and African American peer context may not feel the discomfort associated with being the only African American student in a gifted classroom if race is not salient to them inside the classroom. Perhaps these students' identities are gifted students are more important than racial identities at this time. Positive social cues inherent in interactions with African American peers outside the classroom, e.g. sets of camaraderie, common heritage, and values, however, may make race more salient at those times. Thus, the psychological tensions associated with living in two social worlds may be lessened for these students. A second possibility is that race may continue to be salient for African American students in the gifted classroom, but they may continue to achieve because of other motivations. A number of studies have suggested that some high-achieving African American students maintain high levels of school engagement as a way of combating racial discrimination. Bowman and Howard, 1985, O'Connor, 1997, Sanders, 1997. In many cases, parents of these high achievers have instilled in their children that the best defense against teachers with negative views of African American students is high achievement. Another possibility that has been well explored is that certain African American students may simply not ever see race as a defining aspect of their identity and thus experience little tension in the classroom or in peer contexts. Racial centrality another component of the MMRI, reflects the relative importance of race to the individual. Sellers, et al., 1998. Embracing an identity where race is downplayed, i.e. a low centrality identity, may indeed be adaptive in some contexts. Sellers, 1993. Many assume that African American students desire contacts with other African Americans and that their well-being is hindered by lack of same-race friendships. Research has not yielded firm conclusions on the relationship between racial centrality and achievement. Some researchers posit that a de-emphasis on race or low centrality allows African American students to maintain high levels of achievement. Fordham, 1988. Fordham and Ogba, 1986. Others suggest that a focus race allows African American students to continue to achieve in spite of discrimination and to connect with African American peers. Ford, Harris, Sugar, and Harris, 1991. Little empirical research has been conducted to test either conclusion. One study found that centrality as conceptualized in the MMRI was only modestly related to achievement for a sample of African American college students. Sellers, Chavis, and Cook, 1998, suggesting that the racelessness is not a good strategy for academic achievement. Another study of African American high school students, however, found no relationship between centrality and achievement or academic self-esteem. Rowley, 1997. We shall continue reading research, studies, and history of giftedness in our next session. Thank you so much for listening, and may God bless you. I'm Gloria with Action Speaks on sharing the production inclusions for Every Child Born Gifted by Gloria Key. Thank you again for being with us and listening.